How's everybody doing? I think you know, and welcome back to New York 1-to-1. In today's episode, we'll be building part of the BQE, one of the most hated roads in the city. And later in an extended live play, we'll look at the rest of Brooklyn Heights and some future plans for road layout. But what I think I first need to do is apologize. It has been quite a while since the last video. If you saw the last live stream, you know I was taking a little vacation, but then dealt with being sick once again, and having a lot of work to catch up on and family and friends to enjoy, and put the game on the back burner for a little bit. But I had the urge last week to really dive in and spent a whole lot of hours doing this build and detailing it extensively, which you'll be seeing in the live play. So I know I already called that out as being extended, but it's something that I really wanted to do for this build was to have a particularly long live play. It's close to 10 minutes. It's about as long as this time lapse is. Figure if you're going to take a few weeks off and not put a video out, when you do put a video out, you got to give some decent content. You got to get some decent minutes in there, right? And we're going to fill those minutes with the BQE. So for those of you not in the know, the BQE is the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. It is part of Interstate 278 in New York. And the section we're building today was built controversially in 1954, although I guess really the entire road has a lot of controversy in it, regardless of what section you're talking about. Because the biggest problem with the BQE is that it absolutely slices through neighborhoods. This section here doesn't slice through a neighborhood quite as much, since it is close to the waterfront and it is at a section of elevated land. Well, it sits really in the portion before it's elevated. It's called Brooklyn Heights for a reason. This is on higher ground compared to the rest of the more flatter land closer to the water in Brooklyn, and it's crazy when you go to build this. And of course I've built this in my previous New York maps, but it really, you can see the depression of it on the relief of the map, because it is such a distinct feature in New York. You can really trace the outline of the entire road along the map without having built anything yet. But my main goal for building this today, and I know I discussed this a bit in the live play, which I've actually recorded before this, but I went into the map when I got back from my trip, and I realized that a lot of the businesses in Manhattan were not getting enough traffic because my highway connections were not really there yet. So I wanted to do this build, start building in Brooklyn because I love Brooklyn, but also to start getting more traffic into the heart of the city, giving them different ways to get around and helping with my traffic long term. You saw just a minute before me actually kind of connecting it into quick and dirty interchange with the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, and that those connections are absolutely not final. It was just wanted to hack them in for now. In the same way, I've kind of hacked in the connections from the BQE to the Brooklyn Bridge. The cars are now able to get on and off the Brooklyn Bridge, and you'll see cars driving over it, which looks awesome in the live play. Definitely not finished, needs a lot more detailing, but I'm just glad it's done. I'm just glad one of the bridges is being used now. And you'll see in the early cinematic, there's a long cinematic at the end as well, and we spend a lot of time in the live play as well, just kind of looking around and showing you everything, and it's a really fun part to build. But back to what we're kind of trying to build around here, which is the BQE. But the particular portion that we're looking at is often called the triple cantilever, and that's because there are three roadways, essentially three sections of this highway sticking out of the side of this cliff, essentially. The bottom layer is southbound traffic, the top layer is northbound traffic, and the layer above that is the Brooklyn Promenade, or maybe it's called the Brooklyn Heights Promenade. But it's a very, very popular destination, not only for people that live in the area, but for tourists as well. It gives you some of the most unparalleled views of the city. And that's where I definitely got that name of the details on the title card, on the thumbnail for this episode, because I haven't really been out there too many times. It's a little too crowded and touristy for me, but it's such a cool view. I mean, there's so many good views in New York, in so many different areas. I mean, I love the view over the Queensboro Bridge, for instance, but the view from the promenade is fantastic. Now, the problem with that is they built this in 1954, and it's a pretty complex piece of engineering, and it carries a lot of cars and a lot of trucks every single day, and it is rapidly deteriorating. And their plan is to replace it, but the initial plan that they outlaid essentially had them destroying and shutting down the promenade for several years, and the people in that neighborhood just kind of like, lost their collective craps, because that's what they do. If you want to go find, NIMBYs in New York, this is probably one of the best places to find them. People that have been there a long time before it became ridiculously expensive and posh and unattainable for the average person. But to me, in my opinion, I would tear the damn thing down, and we'll talk a bit about that in the live play as well. But what I wanted to start building out around it was all of Brooklyn Heights. Well, not all of it. There's a few sections that I guess technically would be part of the neighborhood that we're not building today. We're essentially today building from, where it meets the Brooklyn Bridge and then down to Clark Street. Because I did want to include the Clark Street IRT subway station. That's the 2 and 3 trains. And you'll get to see that being built in just a little bit. But this is a fun area to build in, because you have a collection of, smaller, older buildings next to larger, fancier condo complexes. They're not necessarily your new, but they might have been built 30, 40, 50 years ago, but, they're fairly large buildings. So it kind of becomes a little microcosm of the city. You have tall and short right next to each other at varying levels, and I think it looks really nice. And we're not talking yet about the way this detailing looks. We're going to get into that heavily in the live play, but this is definitely one of the most detailed builds that I've done. I think the most detailed build I've done. Let me know below if you think maybe something else was a bit better detailed, but I did a lot of it off camera as well, so that's probably why you saw it go from like not much to back. I just kind of I fell in love with it. I've never detailed this area to this level of my previous builds, but I wanted to up my game here, show you the detailing that I am capable of doing, and really just make this area look cool, because I think it's an important part of the city, overlooking downtown Manhattan and all the skyscrapers, and it deserves to look a certain way. And I think we've really achieved that here. But yeah, you can see a little, I left a piece of railroad in the front there. I was using that to grab some assets, but just layering in these retaining walls here, something that I've never done before. Really just trying new techniques out, playing around, and I'm really excited to do the rest of this area like that, at least along the BQE as I extend it towards the Manhattan Bridge and then to the Williamsburg Bridge and Kosciuszko Bridge eventually. Yeah, the BQE is a ridiculous piece of infrastructure. Like, almost seems unmaintainable in a city like New York, which is why they want to spend billions and billions of dollars to do just that. But we'll have to see if that ever happens. I'm of the belief that it might not actually ever go down that way. It feels like every day in New York they are proposing a new infrastructure project that 2 or 3 years later you're like, oh, whatever happened to that idea they had? That never became a thing, huh? And it's a shame, because we need to be able to chew gum and walk at the same time in this city. We walk real fast. We walk like New Yorkers, but we're just not building our infrastructure fast enough. There's so much to be done, and I just hate that so little of it gets done, and what does get done is ridiculously overpriced compared to world standards. It's a real shame. There's so much that could be done with the city to make it a better place for not only the people that live here now, but the people that will live here in the future. I mean, New York's about 9 million people, and I think the city should be preparing to be 10, 11, 12, and more, to keep pace with other global cities, and we're just not doing it at times. But anyway, enough of me ranting about, why New York could be better, because every city could be better. If we have the right leadership, and, we have the right luck sometimes too. But I had a little problem with the build earlier too. So if you see some of the cars slowing down, I got so scared for a minute because I thought maybe my save was messed up after doing all this work. My speed slider and even the game, like pressing 1, 2, and 3 on the keyboard, would not change the simulation speed. It ended up being like a TMPE thing. I had to just, click one of the toggles and boom, it popped right back into action and started working properly. But oh man, did that give me a scare. This feels like it's going to happen every time I do this now. We're at the point where we're close to 80,000 people in the city. Growing a little bit more slowly now. I had a couple death waves. It probably should be a little higher than it is, but we have to make do with what we have. And I'd really like to know from you down below in the comments, what would you like to see next? You want to stay in Brooklyn, or should we go back to Manhattan for a bit? I know I owe you an episode on Northern Midtown, which I've already teased. That's one I'm going to write a script for, so it's just taking me a lot longer. I'll get to it eventually. But I'm also curious to maybe have one of the upcoming episodes be Times Square, be 42nd Street and that area. I know a lot of people have been asking for it, and yeah, I mean, it's obviously an incredibly iconic part of New York. Even if it's a part of New York that most New Yorkers never, ever want to be in. Like, every time I'm in Times Square, anywhere like close, I just want to curl up in bed and be upset. But I'm not going to be upset now, because now is time for the live play. Stick around. All right, and we're back here in the live play, and I have just so much to show you. I'm going to try to make this a pretty lengthy live play, and hopefully not repeat too much of what I say in the time lapse, which I have not recorded yet. But one thing I'd love to see initially right here is, look at this. People are actually walking along the promenade. So I'm sure I explained it a bit in the time lapse, but the promenade is one of the most bizarre parts of New York to me. The fact that people revere this area, even though it's like right on top of two stacks of major highway, will never be stop being crazy to me. But this was probably the most fun I've ever had detailing this part of the city. Now, I've certainly built this in my previous builds of New York, but never with the level of detail that I've put in here, really trying to layer and stack in so many assets. And I'm really happy with the way this came out. This right here is just one of the piers, one of the footings of the subway assets from, I believe, from the Metro Overhaul mod. I might be wrong on that. And just kind of stacking it in here with all of these retaining walls, I was able to fully enclose this area. So before I actually had finished all of this, you can kind of look in here and it would glitch, and you can see the empty spaces all the way down to the floor, all the buildings behind here, because the game it's a little tricky when you're dealing with so much verticality here, and it's so easy, especially in a New York build when you're working in Manhattan, to have everything be so flat. And this is an area where I can avoid that, and I can build vertical, and I can build layers of things. So being able to put a building down here and a building up here on that same plane but stacked is really a lot of fun. And again, I'm super happy with the way that it came out, and I'm going to continue to use this style a lot, because one of the things that I really didn't do in previous builds of New York was when I built the rest of the BQE out, and we'll look at what that looks like in a moment. But I really left it, as just elevated with just, the standard footings on it, which I've, for the most part in here, I've taken them and I've turned them wherever possible. I'm trying to find one. Here's one where I've turned it so that it looks like it's still supporting that outer edge of the road, but it's not interfering with the traffic. I might need to tweak this a little bit. This one looks like it's just pushing into the road a little bit too much, but I didn't quite finish all the connections here. I really just built enough connections so that traffic could get onto the bridge and into the city, and off the bridge and into Brooklyn Heights. But as we back out here briefly and I bring up the grid, this is, the BQE is probably the most difficult highway system to build throughout this. So the reason why I didn't finish building all this right now is this needs to continue through here, connect and interact with the Manhattan Bridge. It remains elevated, interacting with the street grid in Brooklyn here, elevated, and then eventually goes below grade through Williamsburg, has a very weird connection here with the Williamsburg Bridge, where there's like a spur highway connecting into it, and then it goes elevated again before eventually going over the bridge and into Queens. So that's something that we won't do all at once, obviously. Well, it'll be probably part of certain episodes, probably part of certain live streams, and then possibly just something that I don't show at all, because staying in this view too much is not really what I like to do the most, and I'd rather be showing you this. One thing I really wanted to show as well, and I think it'll probably either show up well in the thumbnail or hopefully in some of the cinematics that I've recorded, but just imagine living here. Imagine living in one of these buildings or in this building here and having this be the view that you wake up to every morning. And you can really understand why Brooklyn Heights is one of the toniest, nicest parts of the city, with remarkably unaffordable rents and remarkably even more unaffordable housing prices if you ever had the thought to buy in this area. But in some ways it's worth it. And that's not even to mention the fact that there's more housing and park down here. So this is like the Brooklyn Bridge Park and this whole area, and we will definitely be building that in a future episode. This will probably all be one episode, building out this area here. Maybe even extending into the area between the bridges, which has a lot of old converted factory areas, and is really a fun spot to build as well, with a lot of these, we'll say cobblestone, but in reality it's Belgian blocks in New York. It's really just a fun area. And another part that I really liked as part of this build here is adding in all the street trees. So in a lot of Manhattan builds, I don't really put in a lot of street trees because that really depends block by block. But, you know, in this kind of, again, nicer area of Brooklyn, there are street trees all over the place. So I try not to go overboard on trees, really trying to understand my limits here for the game, and not trying to stress the game out too much at this point. But I think it really looks nice for this neighborhood in particular, and I feel like leaving it out would be malpractice. Another thing that I've left out is the base of the Brooklyn Bridge assets here. So there is, and I'm gonna get the wrong word, I can't quite think of it right now. I'm recording this pretty early in the morning, but there is, you know, a second part to this asset, but it's like too high and it's really hard to get right. So I'm either gonna leave it out entirely as it is right now, or if I really get frisky, I might consider using procedural objects for the first time, because that would allow me, I think, to probably convert it into an asset and drop it down without deforming the land and allowing it to interact with the roads here. I think that would look really cool, but as you know, I've been pretty reticent in the past to play around with PO, and I don't know, maybe this is finally the time I do it, just for a couple of key things. I would never go into using it too much, but I think there are a few areas where it might be appropriate, and I could probably justify doing it. I like that I've extended the subway out here. People are already using it in droves. There is another subway that goes right around in this area here. It's the High Street station, which has the A and the C trains. And I'll definitely extend that at some point, but I want to build out Cadman Plaza first before doing that, because it kind of runs across it. And really, this whole Brooklyn subway really needs this to get built out to Atlantic Avenue down here, or let's see exactly where it is. Yeah, Atlantic Avenue is, or maybe it's right here. That's about as far south as I want to be extending Brooklyn. And also, I did not know that I could shift enter and use the overlay while I'm in this mode. That is super cool to know. So yeah, I really want to build out Brooklyn to about down here and obviously wrap it into this whole area. But until I build down there, it's difficult to extend out all the subways. But I'm glad I was able to get the IRT in here now and at least give this area some service so it's not completely choked by traffic. Because that's always the argument that, well, if you got rid of the BQE, the traffic would be insane. And once I get this area fully built out, I definitely want to do an episode where the concept of the episode is, let's tear down the BQE. I want to, like, you know, obviously save and then not going to keep it, but delete all of this and show how it's fine. You don't really need it. You know, my theory is that the traffic would not be as horrific as you think it would be. But building this in now helps a lot. There was a lot of buildings in the eastern part of Manhattan, and some of the parts of the builds that we had done in the last couple episodes where houses were being like commercial properties are saying we're not getting enough goods in because the only way for them to get goods was for cars to come in down here or over here and filter all the way through. And I'm hoping with the Brooklyn Bridge being working now that that'll alleviate that concern a little bit more, but I really have a feeling that it might not work perfectly until I connect in the Manhattan Bridge as well, which still needs a lot of work before it's able to be put into the game. But I'm really glad that we've been able to do an extended live play this time, something that I'd like to do a little bit more as the city continues to get built out, and you continue to see some really interesting things to look at. So I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Thank you so much, as always, for sticking around. Tap that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitter. I don't know, look out for the next live stream. It's been a bit of a while in between episodes, but now that I'm back, I'm healthy again, and we're going to keep doing some more of these a bit more quickly, sticking to my schedule as I'd prefer it. So thank you again, as always. We'll see you next time. Bye.